Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that with a single move, Donald Trump could make an entire country vanish from North America's economic map overnight? Right now, sitting on Mark Carney's desk are three cold, hard facts that should make anyone pause. 400,000 Canadian auto workers, 26% of the oil Americans burn every single day, and a deadline in July, now less than 5 months away. And then boom, according to a bombshell report from the New York Times, the Trump camp is quietly exploring something that just 2 years ago would have sounded absolutely insane. Not renegotiating the trade deal, not pressuring Canada for concessions. No, something far more brutal. A North American trade agreement without Canada, just the United States and Mexico. Canada, out, removed from the room like it never mattered. Think about that for a second. If that happens, the agreement that currently protects about 85% of everything Canada exports to the United States, gone overnight. No transition, no safety net, just collapse. Now, on the surface, it looks like a masterstroke, a show of dominance. Washington flexing its muscle, forcing Ottawa into submission. And for many viewers, especially those watching from afar, it feels obvious, right? Canada must be panicking. But here's where things get interesting and frankly, a little dangerous. Because what if I told you this move, this bold, aggressive play might not be strength at all? What if it's a miscalculation? What if the moment Trump pulls Canada out of that deal, he doesn't gain leverage? He loses it. And if that's true, then everything you thought you understood about this negotiation flips completely upside down. So the real question is, who's actually cornered here? Let's cut through the illusion, shall we? Because the moment Donald Trump even thinks about pushing Canada out of the deal, something very inconvenient happens. Reality kicks in. And that reality is backed by numbers so brutal, so undeniable, that no amount of political bravado can hide it. Canada is not some minor trading partner you can just swap out like a broken part. No, it's the backbone of a system the United States itself depends on every single day. Take oil, for example, not theory hard supply. Canada provides roughly 26% of all U.S. oil imports. And we're not talking about just any oil. We're talking about a specific type of crude that flows directly into refineries across the Midwest facilities that were literally engineered to process Canadian oil. You can't just replace that overnight, not in a week, not in a month. There is no magic switch. Now imagine just for a moment that those supply lines get disrupted because of a trade breakdown. What happens next? Gas prices in states like Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin skyrocket. And not slowly, we're talking days, not weeks. And here's the part. No one in Washington wants to say out loud, those states, that's Trump country. That's his voter base. So suddenly this tough negotiation tactic starts looking a lot less like strength and a lot more like lighting a match in your own living room. Even experts are starting to say it openly. Lawrence Herman, one of Canada's most seasoned trade minds, didn't sugarcoat it this week. He warned that what we're seeing is the United States trying to act like a hegemonic bully, but Canada and Mexico are not powerless. And that statement matters because it's not coming from a politician trying to score points. It's coming from someone who has spent decades inside the machinery of global trade negotiations, someone who understands exactly where the pressure points are. So let me ask you something. If the United States really held all the cards, why does this situation look so fragile the moment you examine it closely? Why does one move just one risk, triggering consequences that hit American consumers almost immediately? And more importantly, if oil alone can shake the system this much, what happens when we look at everything else Canada brings to the table? Now, here's where the story turns from risky to outright explosive, because oil is just the beginning. what really ties the United States and Canada together isn't just energy. It's something far more fragile, far more complex, a supply chain so deeply intertwined that trying to cut it apart is like trying to separate two halves of the same body. Let's talk about the auto industry. Hundreds of thousands of workers across cities like Windsor, Oshawa, Brampton, every single one of them is part of a system that doesn't stop at the border. A car built in North America doesn't just come from one country. No, it crosses that border again and again, sometimes 5, 6, even 7 times before it's finished. Steel from Canada, aluminum from Canada, parts assembled in the US, shipped back, refined, upgraded, sent across again. It's not trade, it's integration. And the moment that system breaks, everything breaks. Factories don't just slow down, they stop. Production lines freeze. And not just on the Canadian side, we're talking about major American plants, Ford in Michigan, GM in Ohio, Stellantis operations stretched across the region. All of them rely on the same seamless flow. You can't shut down one side without suffocating the other. It's like cutting off oxygen and expecting only one lung to fail. So when people say, oh, Canada will suffer if the deal collapses, they're not wrong, but they're not telling you the whole story either. Because at the exact same moment, Canadian workers feel the UDAR, American workers feel it too. Same shock, same tuakov, same consequences. Now, to be fair, there is a counter argument, and it's not a weak one. Some analysts insist that Canada's position is being exaggerated. They point out that roughly 75% of Canada's exports still go to the United States. That's a massive dependency. And they're radical. Canada hasn't built alternative markets at that scale yet. Diversifying trade isn't something you do in a year or two. It takes a decade. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. The review is just months away. And if there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, it's that legal obstacles don't slow him down. He simply changes tactics, finds another lever, pushes harder. So yes, Canada is vulnerable. No one serious denies that. But here's the part those arguments quietly avoid. Being vulnerable is not the same as being powerless. And when both sides are tied together this tightly, the real question is no longer who gets hurt. It's who gets hurt more. And this is where the illusion finally cracks. Because once you stop asking, will Canada suffer? And start asking the only question that actually matters, who suffers more? The entire balance of power shifts in a way Washington doesn't like to admit. This week, even voices inside the United States began sounding the alarm. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, hardly a pro-Canada institution, warned that tearing apart the current trade framework wouldn't just bruise the system, it would shock it. American agriculture, American manufacturing, American energy infrastructure, all of it would be exposed to disruptions that no executive order, no last-minute policy patch can magically fix. And then came something even more revealing. Jameson Greer admitted publicly that negotiations with Canada have been more challenging than with Mexico. Think about that. That's not the language of a superpower holding all the cards. That's the language of a negotiator who knows deep down the other side is holding cards too, and they're not small ones. So what is Canada doing while all this pressure builds? Not panicking, not lashing out, calculating. Mark Carney and his team are playing a quieter, colder game. Publicly, they stay calm. They repeat the same line: commitment to a 3-party agreement, stability, cooperation. But behind the scenes, they're moving pieces. This week, Canadian officials stood side by side with Mexico, presenting a united front, no cracks, no division, a clear message to Washington: you don't get to pick us off one by one. At the same time, Canada is quietly expanding its options, strengthening ties with Europe, exploring Asian markets, not as a replacement yet, but as leverage, as insurance. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that keeps trade economists awake at night: the system itself isn't neutral. The body overseeing this entire review process, the Free Trade Commission, is not some independent referee. It's made up of the very countries negotiating against each other. No umpire, no safety net. And in a room like that, the largest economy naturally holds structural advantage, which means when the United States walks in with demands Canada cannot accept and signs are, that's exactly what's coming there, is nothing procedural stopping it from pushing harder and harder. That's the room Carney is about to enter. And once he's inside, there's no one coming to level the playing field. So the question becomes even sharper now, not just who has leverage, but who is willing to use it first. Now we arrive at the moment of truth. Because Donald Trump has already shown his hand, and make no mistake, these are not small demands. They strike at the very core of Canada's economic independence. Access to Canada's protected dairy market, the dismantling of provincial liquor restrictions that favor domestic products, direct pressure on Canada's online streaming laws, and beneath all of it, a deeper, more strategic objective forcing Canada to align more closely with Washington and quietly pull away from Beijing. This isn't just trade, this is control. Accept these terms, and Canada doesn't just make concessions, it reshapes its economic identity, it bends, it adjusts, it becomes step by step more dependent. Reject them, then the risk is immediate. A full-scale trade confrontation at a time when Canada's alternative markets are still under construction, not ready for impact. And right in the center of this storm stands Mark Carney, a man who didn't spend 3 decades navigating global finance without understanding exactly what's at stake here. He knows something most politicians pretend to ignore. Leverage that isn't used is leverage wasted. And right now, this narrow window between today and that July deadline is when Canada's leverage is at its peak, before any deal is signed, before any concession becomes public, before the clock officially starts ticking inside the negotiation room. What Ottawa does in these next 60 days will define the next 10 years. So here's the dilemma, the real one, the one no advisor can answer with certainty. Does Carney put Canada's strongest cards on the table right now? Energy, critical minerals, the quiet but undeniable reality that if Canada is pushed out, it can and will rethink every single resource flow heading south. Make it explicit, make it undeniable. Force Washington to calculate the true cost